Hey folks, welcome back to Biz Talks. My name is Rick Gutierrez. I am your host, and we've got another expert that's going to be with us talking about wireless networking. And again, when I say an expert, I'm talking about expert because Mr. Jim Bradfield, who is joining us again on the show, we're talking about decades and decades of experience, not just him, but his family that has been involved in wireless networking since 1897. So Jim, welcome back to the show, sir.
Great to be here. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to have you. We learn a lot when you are here, and it just this history that you have with you and your family being in the same industry is just congratulations to you guys. I mean, that's just phenomenal. I mean, from one generation to another to continue the legacy, that's phenomenal, and you don't see it that much nowadays. So, congrats to you and your family for sticking with it and making something of it. So, right now, I believe you are calling in all the way from one of the big islands in Hawaii because you're visiting one of your clients. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, we're back again by popular demand.
Well, good. That means that you guys are doing an amazing job, and your clients are, enjoy having you there because obviously you bring all of those expertise. So, with that said, let's talk about your family, the legacy. How long have you guys been on there? We talked about that a minute ago. I mentioned that, for instance, 1897. But your company has been working on secure wireless networks for particularly warehouses, right? So, let's dive into that and give us a summary of what types and sizes of warehouses you support.
Yeah, so most of the warehouses we work with are really, really large. They're an Amazon style, multi-million square foot warehouse. But we also do the mid-range 500,000 square foot warehouse. And then even 25 or 30,000 square foot warehouse, can be done. Typically, though, it's the larger warehouses that have issues. Now, we've been working with those things, all over the world. We work in all 50 states, even here in Hawaii, actually, in a couple of warehouses they have here, which is kind of unusual that they actually have them, but they do. Distribution centers for local, and then we pretty much work on any kind of warehouse. That would be anything with just a standard little, scan gun kind of a thing that you see like in a grocery store or something like that, applied to a big warehouse. Also, even warehouses with, as advanced as robots and all those kind of things that actually do picking within the warehouse. So we do that kind of thing. We do pretty much everything in a warehouse, including secure networking as well. So just to make sure that everything is um, on the right track for the customer.
Right. So when you say warehouses from any range from the mid-sized range to the very large range of warehouses, one of the things that kind of stands out to me, it's got to be some operational issues, right, that happen throughout the entire connectivity of the warehouse. Now, that could be from manufacturing warehouse to maybe inventory warehouse, but your team has probably dealt with some issues, typically addressing in those connectivity issues within those warehouses, right?
Right. Yeah. And so the most prevalent issue is that, you'll get most of the warehouses have use day laborers. They could be day laborers or they could be weekly laborers, but they're typically people who are really untrained and they just are trained to do their little scanner. What typically happens is, like the guys you see on that picture right there, those guys are longer term, but the scanner type of people are really, relatively untrained, and so when they can't make stuff work, they just say, "Oh, the wireless doesn't work." Well, you know, right. But that just means because they can't make the network connect and gather the data they want. So, the typical issues that we see are that maybe they've configured the equipment incorrectly. Um, that means that the new wireless network that somebody just put in from corporate is set for whatever corporate standards there are for configuration, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the older equipment can even talk to it. Or it can only speak on a certain frequency for certain channel, that kind of thing. It doesn't even work with the network. So it goes on and off, on and off, on and off, and what the other kinds of things that we see are that things are packed really tightly. Like they could be having liquids, maybe it's antifreeze or something like that. Well, wireless doesn't go through liquids very well. Maybe it's an air conditioning system for a big AC unit on a roof. Well, that's all metal and the wireless doesn't go through that either. So one of the biggest things is the biggest challenges that we see there are, well, we can't actually make the wireless work around all that with the way it's been originally configured or the way it's been installed. So we do what's called an APOS, an AP access point on a stick test. And we recommend that that gets done within your warehouse. For anything that's got a lot of metal or a lot of interference, a lot of areas that can be a real problem, you want to have a real actual warehouse test of what you're going to expect. See an open area like that, no problem at all. You're going to see an open area. Okay, that's fine. And the access points are hung at 25 feet. But the problem is that if you've got a 40-foot tall ceiling and your shelves are at 30 feet, and the equipment is 5 or 10 feet above that, well, you're looking at a 40-foot tall obstruction. Well, again, you don't know what's going to be happening there. And so if you don't do the access point on a stick test, the actual test of what it's going to do when it gets in that warehouse, that's when you have a problem. And your handheld scanner has to be tested, and all the devices that you're going to connect to have to be tested because they may not be able to work with the new wireless system that somebody from corporate put in. So those are our biggest challenges within the warehouse.
Yeah, when I tell you that I learn something from you every single time that we have this conversation or a conversation, networks or wireless networks don't really work well or gel well with liquids when they're scanning things. And so that's something that has never crossed my mind, never thought that that might be an issue. But for those that are out there watching this show now and they've experienced some of these issues, I mean, it could be anything, right? I mean, Jim, there was a gentleman one time over the phone that basically told me, because he told me that everything was working perfectly on their end and everything looked good. But then they asked me, are you sure there's not a bad connection between the chair and the keyboard? And for a little while, you got to remember the human element, right? Sometimes the human element has a lot to do with, the connection or the bad connection in a wireless network. So there's a lot of times to where the human element plays a big role, and there could potentially not be nothing wrong with the wireless network. So thank you for, elaborating on that and going through that. That's an amazing thing that you guys are doing. So let's talk a little bit more about a real life example of a serious issue where your team was able to solve a large
Sure.
warehouse, wireless issue.
Well, we had, you're familiar with Cisco, the largest
Right.
wireless network company
Mhm.
in the world. They had what's called a TAC case open on a warehouse that manufactures heavy duty machinery. And it's big machinery. I mean, it's the big giant things you see on the roof. And so it's a real blocker of wireless. On top of which they had an open, what they call TAC case, which is the support case, for over 2 years, trying to figure out what the problem was. They called us out, and we found out that there were multiple issues within there. They had access points that didn't have external antennas, so they didn't propagate properly. They had dead spots below the access point. They had the equipment hung over the metal, and so the metal was blocking everything and didn't allow any RF to go anywhere. They also had, if you can believe this, they actually had the barcodes on the bins were legible. So the people who were day laborers kept saying, well, it's the wireless. We can't make anything work. It won't pick it up. But the barcodes were gone. So, you would see the first 4 numbers of maybe a 27 line barcode and it's gone. So we went and looked at every single one of those things. It's everything that you need to do. You got to check every part of that, even the wired part of it, even the barcodes, even the configuration, even the just everything on the network in order to make sure that everything is correct.
Yeah, that's something that, like I said a little while ago, just the human element, right? I mean, you got to be able to check all of those things, and when you can, and the people cannot, then you call in the experts like Jim. So, Jim, we've got a little bit of time left, so I've got another question for you, and that is, any final recommendations you would give to a warehouse management regarding their secured wireless networks? What would that be?
Yeah. So the biggest thing there is doing that access point on a stick test. What that means is you throw that access point up there 25 feet in the air. You either do that with a stick or you do that with a lift. Doesn't matter how you do it. And you put it where you think it's going to go. And then you measure that RF. The reason you do that is to make sure that you don't have that metal or the water or whatever's in those containers that's making that thing be a problem. And once you do that, then you actually know what you're going to expect. And then you need to go to do that for every single location for an access point. And the key is that it's the trade-off in money to do that is, what does it cost you to have somebody completely run a new line, completely move that access point, completely redo your network, versus what it takes for about an hour to test each one of those access points. And that's kind of the biggest thing right there. And then again, test all those devices that you have in the network. My word, you get a wireless what they call COW or something like that, computer on wheels. Well, it may not be up to date, and it might not be able to even connect, to the new wireless network. And the handheld scanners have to be updated, and all of that has to be done and tested too. So you have to know exactly what you're doing in a warehouse. There's a lot of different components. There's, we have about a 20, probably 20, a checklist of about 20 items, I would say, that we go through and make sure is done. And, that's what you need to do for every time you put a new network in.
Yeah, absolutely. So keeping up with updating your technology basically is what's going to give you the best success, right? And making sure that everything
Right.
is stays connected all the time and all of those great things. Hey, Jim, we've had a great conversation once again today on another show, on another episode. We want to thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you, and we look forward to having you again on the upcoming show sometime in the near future. With
My
that
pleasure.
said, yeah, thank you for being here. And with that said, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break and we'll come back with another expert. Stay right there. We'll be right back.